I mentioned red ocean and blue ocean in a previous video and said I'd probably need to do a video to talk about that. So this is that video. I think as long as we're in here, I'm going to probably throw out a few other business terms and try to give them definitions as we go. Red ocean and blue ocean, as far as I know, was coined in a Harvard Business Review article. To simplify it immensely, basically it's this. Red ocean is kind of what it sounds like. It's an ocean or a space where there's tons of competition and the water's all churned up and filled with blood of the competitors biting and chewing and just fighting with each other. On the other hand, a blue ocean is a place where there is no competition, where it's wide open and you're able to carve out your own space by building something new. The classic example of a blue ocean project is Cirque Du Soleil. Traditional circus space is a very red ocean space. There are actually a fair number of circuses, margins are incredibly tight, prices are incredibly low. It's very hard to enter into this space. Cirque Du Soleil took the traditional circus model, removed some of the controversial elements like animals, increased the price dramatically, and turned it from something you take your kids to on Saturday into something you get dressed up for and go to on a Saturday evening. And they've been incredibly successful by doing this. So this is where this term comes from, is the idea that rather than enter into competition in a place where there's tons of competition, find a space that may be related to that red ocean, but is different enough that you actually redefine the business. Starbucks is often used as well as a blue ocean maneuver, where they took coffee, where in the 80s, coffee shops were places where you went and you paid 75 cents for a cup of coffee, and they invented this new kind of space where you went to a space that was specifically about socializing and being in a space. They charged 6-7 times as much for a cup of coffee, and they created a new market. What's been happening to Starbucks recently is that the third space, which has been a thing that Starbucks was big on in its early days, seems to have kind of gotten squished away. And now that it's just about getting your macchiato, it's becoming commoditized. So that blue ocean that they created back in the day is turning into a red ocean as more and more competition enters into the space and they start competing over price. How does this apply to game development? Should you be looking for a blue ocean? Well, there have been examples of games that have successfully done that, where they've taken something that was established and they've changed it enough to essentially create a more accessible, broader, more profitable game that isn't in that direct competitive space. Plants vs. Zombies is a good example of that. Plants vs. Zombies is a tower defense game. There are thousands of tower defense games on the marketplace. There were thousands of tower defense games on the marketplace before Plants vs. Zombies even came out. But what Plants vs. Zombies did is it said, let's take something that is very hardcore, very competitive, very tactical, very inaccessible, make it easier to access, make it more interesting to look at, more cartoony, and they essentially created a blue ocean opportunity within the tower defense space. I think, though, that this terminology can get you into a lot of trouble, because if you go too far into the blue ocean, there's nothing around. And if you make something that's too different from what people can understand, you're going to have difficulty explaining what it is. And it might turn out that people just don't want this thing. You can easily imagine a world in which Cirque Du Soleil tries to sell its product and people can't get past the fact that circuses are cheap things for kids. When you're looking for blue ocean opportunities, you do have to be careful that you're not sailing too far out to sea, because you might end up just drowning your project in the process. Related to blue ocean and red ocean is something that's called first mover advantage. So first mover advantage is the sense that the first product, the first company to do something has an advantage over everyone that comes after them. A lot of the love of the blue ocean is the feeling that the first mover advantage is a real thing that's really strong. And in some industries, that's absolutely true. In some industries, getting there first is the thing that matters most. But for me, in most cases, I don't feel that first mover advantage is really there for games. When you actually look, most of the well-established players in a genre are not the people that got there first. Destiny isn't the first looter shooter. They may be the first ones that called it that, but they weren't the first ones there. WoW isn't the first MMO. What you often have in games, rather than a first mover advantage, is a second mover advantage. If you watch the space, you can see trends as they start to emerge, follow in the wake of the game that went in front of you. And because you haven't spent all your energy cutting through those vines to define this new space, you still have reserves left to outcompete that first mover in the space. That's my feeling, that in most cases, you're not better served being the first one on the ground. Now, I do think that applies mostly to AAA, where budgets are large and the cost of going somewhere is very expensive. I do think that in the indie space, there's something to be said to being the first one on the ground, because in some cases, there's only room for one player, and you might end up being left with this opportunity to yourself. So all of this actually kind of reminds me of something that was mentioned when I took my economics courses, which is all restaurants are monopolies. And that wasn't really gone into very much during the course, but there is a concept called monopolistic competition. And monopolistic competition is the idea that in some industries, you have a bunch of different players that are each effectively a monopoly on their own. So they're in competition with each other, but they also have characteristics that are unique to themselves. So going back to restaurants, if I am thinking I want Italian for dinner, it doesn't matter that there's a McDonald's right next door. I've restricted my potential restaurant selection massively down. And then each Italian restaurant has certain unique features that effectively makes it a little tiny monopoly in the situation. There's the one that's closest to me. There's the one that I go to from work, so everyone knows me. And honestly, I think for most genres of video game, we're in a situation of monopolistic competition. If I am looking to play a Witcher, I'm not going to go and buy a Dragon Age because it's cheaper or because it's more easily accessible or whatever other competitive edge it might have, because I've decided I want to play a game with Geralt in it. So the only thing that's really competing with it are the other older Witchers. So I do think that some of the thinking that happens within this industry forgets that each game should be a little experience on its own. It stands on its own, that is a tiny little monopoly, because it provides things through its setting and story and gameplay that no other game can. And I think maybe the reason this has happened is that in some genres within video games, maybe this isn't completely true. If I'm looking to play a competitive shooter or a sports game, then maybe I'm making my buying decision in a different way than if I'm looking to play a Dragon Age or a Witcher or an Uncharted, where I'm making my decision based upon the game, not any competitive feature set. First mover advantage, second mover advantage, blue ocean, red ocean. If there are any other business terms or gaming terms you want me to talk about, let me know down in the comments, and maybe I'll make another video about that. Special thanks to my members. You provide the resources that this channel needs to keep running. If you are interested in becoming a member, there will be a link down in the description. I would really help the channel out. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up so that YouTube knows that it is garnering a lot of attention. If you have any other thoughts, please put them down in the comments. That also helps the video immensely. I will see you again soon. Thank you.